Okay. Well, we are getting started here. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another session of Tara's Third Thursday webinar. So, third Thursday at 3, the three threes, or the three T's, I guess. Um, Again, we're going to have another very good program, another very good session. But as we always do, we are going to wait just a few moments to allow some people that are stragglers or having technology difficulties, as we encountered ourselves a little while ago, to get into the session and make sure that y'all can hear us and see us. So if you are in the session, if you have any kind of technical problems, please use the chat feature. We'll keep a monitor on that and see if we can't help you while we get these things going. But we're going to start things off in earnest at about 3:02. So in about 60 more seconds, we're going to get started, and we'll talk with you all in a minute. Just hang on. Again, for those that are just joining us, you do have audio, hopefully. If we just weren't talking there for a minute because we are, and we do always wait a couple of minutes to get started just to make sure that anybody who's having issues with the technology can get logged on. So we appreciate you all being here on time and being prepared. We're going to get going in just just a few seconds, about another 20 or 30 seconds when we'll get started. All right. Wally, you're texting me here on the side. My focus could only be in so many different directions. But you like the beard? Yeah, that's no. All right, beard aside, we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, thanks everyone for being part of our Terra Third Thursday series. Um, as we always do, we get started on time. So today is March 21st, 2024. I say that for posterity's sake. So if for those people that are watching this later on the recorded session on our GoToWebinar channel, which I encourage everybody to do because all of our stuff is up there going back 3 years now of Terra Third Thursday webinars. A lot of fantastic information is out there, so go out and take a look. Um, so for those that are, kind of regular, to this session, you kind of understand what this is all about. This is 45 minutes. We try to keep it as close to 45 minutes as possible. What we're going to do is, just give you some information that you can use, information that's, affects your bottom line, affects your people. We want to make sure that we're bringing, constantly good, topics and sources of information for you on a monthly basis. And as we continue to grow, which we've now achieved our 113th facility in 11 countries, 13 countries. Uh, we'll probably want to start doing this more often. But kind of let's go ahead and get started. Uh, we're very pleased to welcome the experts with us from JS Held to be our hosts this month. They're one of our new allied members. They joined us not too long after last year's eScrap conference. I'm going to kind of let them introduce their company and kind of what they're all about. But our co-hosts today are Bonnie Moore, Bob Costello, and Monica McCaskill. So they're going to be talking about what is this thing called industrial hygiene and why does it matter? So I'm interested to hear about this. This is a very unique, topic for us. So I can't wait to hear what they have to say. But before I turn things over to them, just a couple of quick announcements, then I will quickly get out of the way. Just want to recognize, as we always do, our renewing members. So coming back to us this month, the month of March, the Blind Center of Nevada, R2V3, glad to have you back. Minnesota Tech for Success, Minnesota Tech for Success. Sorry, Tamara. Both of those are nonprofit organizations. We love to have them in our organization. SunTech Recycle, Elgin Recycling in the Chicagoland area, who's actually part of our Done With It program. Welcome back. And then, as I mentioned, we continue to grow. We opened up a new market. We are now in the United Arab Emirates. So we're welcoming Rapid Solutions International to the certified group of members. And one last thing, again, for posterity's sake, we want to make sure that we get this announcement in today because it actually happened today. We just launched a brand new website with one of our certified partners, ERS, and that is Devices for Autism. So as many of you may know, ERS is a nonprofit recycler, and they hire folks that are on the autism spectrum, adults. So it's a workforce development program for adults with autism. They're a fabulous organization. So what we're doing is we've kind of created a version of the Done With It program just specifically for them in this program. So we're asking for people to send in their laptops and tablets that are in high quality, good condition, where they can be refurbished and repaired by these folks and help them with their mission. So we're very excited. We're kind of launching this as a kind of a soft beta here in the Southeast. So kind of all the states surrounding Tennessee is where we're going to be, first launching this, but with anticipation within the next few months, this will be a national program with other potential recyclers in addition to ERS being part of the mix. So we are been working on this for some time and very excited about devices for autism. So with all that said, it's about time to flip this thing over to our friends at JS Held. I'm going to be monitoring this presentation. So for folks that are on the line, if you've got questions, put it in the questions area or the chat feature, wherever. I'm going to be monitoring both, and then I'll be asking questions intermittently, and then we'll get to any other questions at the end. So without further ado, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Tara, for giving us this opportunity to introduce ourselves, JS Held, and most importantly, the role of the industrial hygienist. As we know, their expertise is now an integral part of the updated e-waste and industry regulations. My name is Bonnie Moore, and as Steve said, we have Bob Costello and Monica McCaskill here. Bob leads our health sciences team in Wilmington, North Carolina, and is a certified industrial hygienist. And Monica is a project manager lead on Bob's team and also a scientist. My role here is to assist you and any member of the industry, especially now that the organization is growing globally, as we just heard. So if no matter where you are in the world, if you have a need or a question, you can reach out to me. You can use me as a point of contact, and I'll be sure to direct you where it's appropriate and save you a lot of time and searching. So, but together, the three of us have over 25 years of experience assisting industrial clients globally with their occupational exposure, product stewardship, and risk assessments or risk management needs. So JS Held, we have 100 offices around the world and over 2,000 professionals. So we, are local to a lot of people in various countries and regions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over and let our subject matter experts give you a good presentation. So, Bob?
Thank you, Bonnie. So, we're here to talk about what this thing called industrial hygiene and what's it mean to us. For those of you who don't know, you're going to learn. For those of you that have experienced or have background in industrial hygiene, should be a good refresher. A few takeaways. Hopefully, when we're done, this is what hopefully you're going to learn, or at least be able to understand a little bit more. First of all, what is industrial hygiene? What do industrial hygienists do? What are some of the major industrial hygiene concerns in e-waste recycling? What are the expectations of the industry? And then finally, where to find some help. So we're going to cover all these topics as we go through today. So what's industrial hygiene? Well, when I started back in this profession 43 plus years ago, it was the recognition, evaluation, and control of occupational, physical, and biological stressors and hazards. Well, since that time, it's been expanded to include anticipation as well as communication. And what you see on the slide here is verbatim from the E-Stewards Standard V4 on the definition of industrial hygiene. So what we're going to do for a little bit is just talk about each one of these circles as to what's it mean to an industrial hygienist? What do we do? How do we get things done? And why do we do it? So first thing we do, anticipation. So what's anticipation all about? Well, that's where we do our homework. Before we start, we try to figure out, all right, what should we expect here? Is there anybody who's already done work in these industries, and do they know, hey, what have they seen? Because when you walk into something blindly, you really just don't know where to start. But a little bit of research ahead of time gets you in a much better position. Some of the things that we look at, if we have experience in operations like this, well, we quickly try to pull things up in our head as to what we saw, or we start searching the internet. Boy, it's wonderful to be able to find all kinds of papers, articles, and different things that talk about the exposures, and it gives you an idea of what to expect. For those of you who may have to do this, one really good place to start is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, looking at their health hazard evaluations. You can go to their website, you can see it listed here, and you can punch in the industry or the information that you want to look at, and they'll give you all the times they've been asked to come into a site to evaluate the health hazards at the operation. So we got to do that. We got to look up regulations. There's a lot of different regulations that apply. We want to know specifically what they may mean for the operations that you do. And once in a while, you have to reach out to other people like I'll reach out to another CIH or a health and safety professional that I've met in the industry to talk to them and say, hey, something new. Have you seen this before? And what do you think? The one nice thing about our profession, we like to talk to each other and help each other. So we're a small group of people. There's only 5,000 of us right now in the world that are certified industrial hygienists, and there's a whole lot of people that depend on us. So we're trying to be pretty good with each other and help each other out. So after we've anticipated, then we got to go figure out and say, what did we learn, and take it out in the field and see what it means to your operations. What are your operations doing? What do they have? What are your processes? Are you manually taking things apart? Are you shredding things? Are you doing a combination of the two? We have to come out and go look at the operation and get a good understanding. Based on what we learned then, we start to look at the processes we have to evaluate, and we have to prioritize things. You walk into an operation and very quickly you can be overwhelmed when you see all kinds of things moving around in multiple directions, multiple speeds, things going up conveyors, things dropping into shredders, pieces coming out, being moved around and around and around. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You have to learn to figure out, okay, where do I start? Where do I prioritize? Now, something that we have to deal with a lot is regulatory requirements. And this industry is impacted by what we call OSHA single substance standards. Here's a list of the single substance standards that exist, and these would all probably apply to most recycling operations, e-scrap recycling operations. So when you have these standards, they have specific requirements for a whole host of things, including testing, medical monitoring, training, storage, handling. You've got to know these regulations and see where's the operation stand as it applies to these. And what do I have to worry myself with? So in this industry, this ups the ante really quickly. Now, evaluation is the next part of our role. This is the part I like the best, because this is where I'm out in the field, I'm out collecting data, and we're sitting there and watching the work happen. Now, it's important. A lot of people have asked me how can I get my job, because I sit around and watch people work. Well, I'm watching, but I'm watching with intent. And the intent is to watch just nuanced activities that somebody's doing, because you'd be surprised how a slight little thing, one activity, or one slight little action can have either a very positive or a very negative effect on a person's exposure. Well, during the evaluation process, when we're putting out the equipment, and you can see some of the industrial hygiene equipment that we have, that we utilize in the evaluation process. While we're doing that, we're watching the people work and we're learning a whole lot of things. Uh, a question I often ask when I'm sampling, particularly when I'm working with people, and I kind of wonder, am I really seeing the real job, or is this a special operation day for me? And when you've done this a long time, you start to be able to say, yeah, I wonder. You'll ask questions. And it allows you to ask questions and find out, are we looking at the right stuff or something different? So depending on the kind of stressors and what we're looking at, we have a whole host of different instruments, or we like to refer to them as toys, to work with. You see sound level meters, you have noise dosimeters, you've got air sampling pumps and sampling media, that big little sphere on the bottom, that's a whole air sampler, kind of a neat device. All you do, put it out, turn it on, it sucks the air in, evacuates the vacuum that's in it, holds the air, and it's testing the air exactly as it was. Sent into the lab. You'll see the little square and the little wipe. That if you've been seeing industrial hygienists in your operations, you know what a wipe sample looks like. So we do all those kind of different equipment, and we do sampling. We do sampling on the people. We do samplings of the areas. We can do both. We can do for little bits, pieces of a part of an operation. We can do it for the whole day. We often do both of those just to see, because sometimes the activities that are being done are done in spurts. It's quick, this is going to be a 2-hour job, then I'm not doing that for another 2 hours while I reload it, and then I do it again. Then I reload it and do it again. So we may have to do that in short durations as opposed to all day. So to me, this is the fun part of the job, because you're out there and enjoying yourself. So after we've been out having fun and get all our sampling and send all the stuff to the laboratories, we get the laboratory results back, then we have to start understanding, okay, now what? We have to figure out, oh, this is what the results say. Okay, I now understand what our exposures are. Who am I going to share this with? What I got to share. So it's important that you do communication. And in fact, there's compliance obligations around notification of workers. If you do exposure monitoring of workers, you have to let them know the results. Sometimes the standards.
That's interesting. So, like, does it need to be posted? Does it need to be, like, what are those specific? You gonna get into that? I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun.
No. That's perfectly fine. No, it depends. If you're doing monitoring for one of the single substance standard materials, you absolutely have to give that to the person directly in writing. With the others, it would be okay that don't require that. It would be okay to put up a listing on the wall, for this, we sampled these for this, and people could see the results. If you're smart, you do direct response to the employee and do it in writing. Because at some point you may have to be able to prove and show that documentation. That could be when you have a compliance officer at your door, or that might be something you may have to be dealing with after the fact in litigation or workman's comp claim. Mm-hmm. So you really gotta, at the minimum, post it on the wall. Reality, you're better off in this world, in this litigious world. Put it in writing and hand it out to the person, and you retain a copy. Mm-hmm. And in fact, something I've done in my career in the past is we not only sent it to them, they signed it, but then they returned it to us. We have a returned signed copy. just unfortunately the nature of the society with which we live.
Best be safe than sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
it won't matter. So after we've figured out what we needed to do, gone through, did the monitoring, we got the results, we've notified everybody. Now we got to do something with what and identify, well, if we got something good, we don't have to do much. Let's maintain whatever we're doing is working. Don't mess with it, but maintain it and make sure that it's you know, make sure that it's operating properly. However, there may be times where we get results that are unacceptable, where exposures are very near to the standard or over the standard. And at that point, you got to do something. Now, what you have to do will depend on the nature of the problem and the abilities to take advantage of this hierarchy of controls. The best way is to eliminate or substitute. Well, if you eliminate or substitute the sources of hazardous materials, particularly heavy metals and other things of that nature within the e-scrap industry, I suspect you're getting rid of the e-scrap
Altogether.
altogether. So what happens is then you're kind of moved down to the area of what engineering controls. And engineering controls, a common one would be local ventilation. You'll see a picture of a hood over an exhaust of a conveyor belt or something sitting over the exhaust of an oven. That's engineering control. Administrative controls are procedures. They're simply, we're going to have a way, okay, we're going to have our people are only at work 3 hours on this shift and then 5 hours on that shift because we found if they work for 4 hours in that shift, they're over the limit. So we can manage people that way. And the last choice of controls is personal protective equipment. And we know what they are, respirators, gloves, materials like that. The thing with those, they're the least reliable and they're the most dependent on the worker to actually use and utilize correctly. So that's not your first choice. Now, there's times where you have to use them while you're working at getting the administrative controls or the engineering controls in place. That's kind of acceptable, but that's not your first choice of long-term control. So you have to kind of wait and see what's going on. PPE is a challenge because you got to meet people, you got to fit testing. Oh, and by the way, if you have to employ respirators as part of your personal protective plan, you got a whole new OSHA standard with a multitude, and I mean a multitude of issues to address,
including a written program.
Yeah.
And it should be said that with the hierarchy of controls, you should be using engineering controls if that's available to you. Sometimes it can cost a little bit more money to do that, but there are certain phrases within the standards for compliance that state you cannot use administrative or personal protective equipment until you've exhausted your ability to use engineering controls to control the hazards.
Yeah. So yeah, they're. Go ahead, Steve.
I'll say the other piece of that too is, think back to the pandemic when there was limited supplies of PPE.
Absolutely.
So if in that scenario, when there is no control available, does that shut people down?
Does it shut people down?
So
Well,
if I can't, if there is no respirator, you just can't work. That sort of thing.
Right.
The job's not getting done.
Yeah, the job. Yeah, well, that's when everyone has to sit back and recognize and understand what their acceptable level of a risk is. And so companies may forward on and do the activity, but they're doing so at a peril that they might be causing exposures that's going to come back and significantly grab them in the tail. And so you have to think that the thing I've always told people is you can't undo an exposure.
Yep.
And if you think about it, yep, nope, there's no way I can do that. So the goal is often let's prevent the exposure in the first place. All right, Monica, got your section.
All right. So, what are some of the common IH concerns in this industry? So, there's a variety of hazards, and they can come from leaking of the e waste material that is being brought to the site that's been damaged during transport. It can be chemical hazards that arise during your shredding operations, and those contaminants can also leak into the environment and cause big issues for you. Some of the hazards that we see that are most common, um, they require they require a lot of compliance to go along with them. Some of these are the not so precious metals, as we like to call them: lead, mercury, cadmium, chromium, beryllium, arsenic.
I love
Uh,
that. I'm gonna steal
yep,
that. Sorry.
yep. No, go right ahead.
I have a, don't worry, I have a copyright.
Yeah, that's Um, yeah, some of the other hazards include flame retardant materials and crystalline silica and solvents. Um, and a lot of these, the starred materials on here in particular, are materials that have single substance standards for occupational safety regulations. And so they have a whole host of criterion that go along with exposure. And NIOSH HHEs have done a plethora of occupational monitoring in the e-waste industry. And HHEs are health hazard evaluations. All of these materials have been found during e-waste um, processing. Levels of flame retardants, lead, and cadmium have actually been over the occupational exposure limits in some of these evaluations. And so it's important to do your monitoring for these substances. Other extraneous materials that you see are also things that you wouldn't normally place in the e-waste recycling industry, like bloodborne pathogen exposure. That could happen from materials that are mixed in with e-waste, such as needles or other materials that might have blood on them. I think that Bob has had some experience with that in the past.
Yeah,
And
Uh,
everybody's done a an on-site collection or a community collection where they got their knuckles smushed
yep,
moving a big heavy TV.
well,
that's right.
you got that, and then just boxes sit around, and you'd be surprised what falls into those big Gaylord boxes
Yep.
of materials. And yeah, we've had the place where I was at, we had a collection of syringes that found their way into our into the
Oof.
boxes,
Yep.
and we were able to, fortunately our people were smart and figured out how to segregate, but they learned not to reach in, just tip the whole thing.
Hmm. And then some other IH concerns that we have are the physical hazards. We have noise, depending on where your facility is located, or what your HVAC system is like. You might have heat or cold stress for your workers throughout the day. There's magnetic fields from the separators, ionizing radiation sources. You also have ergonomic concerns for your employees as they're performing their work throughout the day, such as heavy lifting or transferring of these materials. They can cause some issues. And then there's other general safety concerns as well: machine guarding and overhead hazards, forklift operations inside the facility. Those are all things that need to be addressed as well. Um, Biological hazards, as I already touched on, the bloodborne pathogen compliance. That should be part of your safety plan, and the drugs and drug paraphernalia found in the Gaylord boxes, as Bob discussed. And I'll
What about, I'm just thinking back to the pandemic. Obviously
mhm,
this industry was deemed essential, which it is,
yeah,
but contamination was a real risk for everybody that was handling this material. Um, yeah, that's obviously something that that you all take into consideration too.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. You will certainly have to take that into consideration. Now, in some respects, um, you're a little better off because, with like COVID and other pathogenic materials that may be on surfaces, they typically have a finite life expectancy in certain environments. So if you've got boxes that have been sitting for weeks and weeks and weeks, I wouldn't really get too worried about them. But freshly received materials or stuff that's collected, like you say, in a community setting, or setting like that, yeah, you might want to let them sit for a week or two before you even think of touching them. From that kind of perspective, but it does raise something you have to think about. It's never quite easy. So we move on to what's the industrial hygiene expectations of the industry. Steve, you touched on something really that was important to me when you started us off with about everybody is moving into Rev 3 certification now for R2 certification. I got started in this profession when it was Rev 1. Back in 2018, 17, 18, I was hired on by a company. They were doing a startup e-scrap operation, a little different than what most people do, but we were going for our R2 Rev 1 certification. Now, back then, there wasn't a lot of information of what the expectation of was for an industrial hygiene program, or they just said you need to do some very little close to what's the language on the current slide, but it didn't tell you what that really meant. Now, being at that time a 36-year plus IH, practicing it all over the world in all kinds of different industries, I think I was in a pretty good position to maybe make the leap of faith as to what it took to have a comprehensive program, and that's in fact what we did. However, if you're new to this field or you're just learning, or this has just now been given this to you as this is what has to be done, you're never going to know where to start. And now it's gotten a lot better. Rev 3 here, and then we'll talk more about it in e-stewards. Now they're being a lot more explicit as to what the expectations are. I mean, they're now making sure it's an incorporation of your EH&S management system, and it's telling you things that are within the standard. And I have the standard up here. I don't need to read it. You guys can read it. You probably even have your own copy. But these are standards that talk about, and I highlight a couple of the sections that what you really have to think about. And it's important that you have to take in legal compliance as well as the need to protect the workers, the public, and the environment. The public and the environment is the part that always made me think hard, because my workers have families. The people who work for me have families. And, we're doing our level best to keep and take care of everything in the workplace. But what we don't want to do is what's there migrate home. We don't want you to inadvertently contaminate your car, your shoes, your house, your children. So the goal is to make sure that we got our act together where we use it and make sure it doesn't escape from this thing. And that was, if I wanted to say the thing that kept me up at night, it's that object, and trying to make sure that that was the case. So back to art. Occasionally I'll go into soapboxes, so hang in there.
They're important.
But the management system, Rev 3 talks about the fact that you need to have it, and they do even talk about the need for periodic evaluation of the risk of exposure. In the past, there was no mention of that. Now they're telling you you have to do it, and they're even identifying which materials you should be looking at. If you look at what's on that list, it's pretty much everything that Monica had in her slide before. That are leaving no uncertainty as to what you should be looking at. And you know what? There'll be probably new materials that are coming up all the time too, particularly as technology changes and information and materials. I mean, you'll notice the word lithium here, but anybody in the battery business will, they have to watch that. More, they talk more about the thing, and they start to talk about now more. You have to do inspections of the equipment ahead of time. You want to make sure that housekeeping's dealt with. You provide sanitary facilities for workers. Consumption of food and beverages here is not maintained free of cost. You don't want to eat where you have materials. So you've got to make sure that you have ways you keep the materials contained to where you want them, and you make sure that people don't do it. Now, recognize that's a big challenge. A lot of the operations, I mean, operation I was at was in Memphis, Tennessee. And Memphis, Tennessee in the summer, if you folks have never been there, is a rather warm environment. And much of our facility was not air conditioned. So it was a little unpleasant, to say the least. And the thing was, we had to also watch for hydration and making sure that people were properly hydrated. We weren't having heat stress issues. So we had to come up with some rather creative ways to be able to have water and drinking capabilities in proximity of where they were, and in a manner that people didn't contaminate when they went to go do something. We all our water fountains became foot pedal control.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because your foot's a lot further than your head when you're drinking the water. But these are the kind of things you had to take. And people, I want to have my coffee or my bottle. Not happening. We just couldn't do it. So you have to anticipate and deal with those things. Now, one thing that is important about this standard now, they designate a qualified employer contact to actually help people and promote it. That wasn't necessarily the case. I mean, it's not uncommon for a person to carry many hats in a small organization. And they're saying, well, that's well and good, but you better make sure this person has a good idea of what they're doing as it comes to the industrial hygiene side of things. And then they get into a little bit of when you're in Appendix F gets into just as much detail. But what's real interesting is they describe, to some extent, the person who's doing the hazard identification assessment, that they actually have to be trained in risk assessment and analysis techniques. So it's not like you're going to send an accountant out to do your risk assessment as it relates to health and safety any more than you send a health and safety guy out to do a book audit of your financials. You have the right person for the job. So the standards becoming a lot more explicit. If you compare this to the early revisions, you would go, oh, okay, this is technically it's getting easier, but it's getting more prescriptive.
Correct.
They're taking out the ambiguity, which is good, because this is, like I said, this goes back to preventing exposure, and you can't ever take back an exposure. And then even further on, if you're doing metal recovery, you've got all these things to take into consideration. I've highlighted, you establish decon, you have food and drink areas, you prohibit shoes and clothing from being taken home. Absolutely most important thing. Yes. But if you have shoes for work and you have shoes for home, you got to make sure that one doesn't contaminate the other. So it's kind of tricky. You got people, and you have to set up pretty good exposure controls, and you got to have really good training. And you got to work with people, and you got to remind them. So, but I did find that when you talk to the workers and you talk to them about it, they say, look, do you have kids? And usually, yeah, I got, a couple little kids and all that. It's like, about this. Yeah. I say, you got to, think about what you're doing. He goes, I got you. Thank you. You're right. This makes sense. I need to do this. So one of the things as an IH is you make it personal.
Yeah.
And just the communication on it.
Well, we're coming up on 5 more minutes, so
All right,
just from a
well, real
timing
quick,
standpoint.
the industrial hygiene, E3, or I'm sorry, the Steward Standards has a whole section on industrial hygiene program. You don't have to guess anymore. It's laid
Mhm.
out. So if you're gonna, and even if you're not going for East Steward certification, if you are only going with R2, look at it. It will tell you it's the same thing. In some respects, it's a little more detailed. Sometimes the slight differences in the frequency of things being done versus one uh, over the other. Both of them point out to an important thing to do when you're doing changes, when you're bringing in new materials or different materials, or you're putting in new equipment, or you're adding similar equipment, but causing different, what increases potential of exposures. You gotta figure out what the exposure is and reevaluate this exposure to see what has and hasn't happened.
And for
Most,
our listening community here, I mean, with R2 and E stewards, they now are both like accepting like the Rio standard for environmental health and safety. There is a lot of parity in that area for both
yeah.
the certifications.
All right. So I jumped through. There's no need to beat the standards any harder. You can read them.
Absolutely. And so, where can you find an industrial hygienist that can assist you with these things? Well, Dr. Google is your friend. You can just Google industrial hygienist in your area. If you Google industrial hygienist in Wilmington, North Carolina, Bob Costello's name comes up. Um,
I'm
the
the first on the list.
That's right. The American Industrial Hygiene Association, or AIHA, they also have a searchable list of consultants on their website, which we've listed here. And JS Health, we have more than 14 certified industrial hygienists that are all over the United States, and we also have other junior industrial hygienists like myself that have 10 years of experience or more. Bob has 40 years of experience or more. Not to date him, but
Thanks, Brian.
yeah, 40 years or more, huh?
Yeah.
So yeah, we love to collaborate with our clients and help you to meet the needs of the standards and to protect your workers.
Just a takeaway. People say, you have a personal motto or what you do. Well, this is my personal professional motto, which is, and this is what I tell people anywhere I've worked, where I've been the EH&S manager or responsible for whatever. My goal is for the worker to return home at the end of the workday in the same shape they arrived at the start of the day, and maybe even better.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
that is, my marching orders, and have been for all 40 plus 3 years that we've been doing this. And I'm happy for it. All right, got some time for questions. Were there any questions?
Well, I didn't see anything pop in yet, but I have got a couple here. First of all, thank you. You guys did a great job. I think now this entire industry has gone through this in the last 12 months of getting certified to the new version 3 standard, and obviously e-stewards and R2 making it a serious effort to protect the employees that are handling this material, and all of our members doing the same. I think it's for us, it just demonstrates one more reason for Terra as to get out there into the marketplace and explain why certification matters, because it certainly does. Because those organizations that aren't following this, are really detriment to the potentially the health of their employees. So
So,
I like to boil some of these down to some questions that, in terms of, bottom line ideas for our members. One thing
Sure.
that's out there right now is people are looking to expand. I I can't tell you how many people are asking us, do you know anybody who's selling? No, we don't look, because everyone's buying. So
Right.
if somebody's looking to maybe expand into a new facility and they see a location that's potentially that might work, you know, what are the risks of not having this kind of like environmental assessment done on the front end to just to kind of find out what they're getting into?
Well, if you're talking about citing a facility or an operation, you have phase one, phase two environmental assessments. And failure to do that will mean that in the event something goes wrong, you are responsible for it, hook, line, and sinker.
Mhm.
So if you don't make sure that you have an acknowledgement of the way the material is when you first took ownership, anything that's found is yours. It could have happened 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 100 years ago. You're going to be the one held accountable. However, if you do these assessments, you know this is what we got. This is where we're starting from. Yes, we may have some things, but we didn't. Anything that's this
You can draw a
isn't us.
line.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can make a line in the sand.
Mhm.
That's probably one of your most important things. The second, so that's just the facility. With regard to doing the operation, well, you know what the operation is going to be, you know what the equipment is going to be. Well, you're going to need to make sure, if this is your very first line, you're going to need to make sure, do I have things in place, the controls for us to allow to do the work? If I don't, do I need to put these in at first or not? The
Hmm.
thing is, putting them in after the fact tend to be expensive and a pain in the butt in
Yeah,
reality.
retrofitting. Not great.
Yeah, it's not productive. However, if you're trying to go fast, then you're looking at these, the PPE and administrative controls, and you may not do as well.
Mhm.
So I appreciate the need for speed, but at the same time, control is also important.
Mhm.
And it
Is there
also
any,
could help you. It also could help you from the negotiation standpoint when, you're looking at how much you're going to offer
invest?
to buy
Yeah.
that business, and you want to make sure you're putting in your cost for remediation or whatever you're going to need to bring it to a level that's acceptable.
Exactly.
You're trying to eliminate surprises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I will
Mhm.
say thank you all. Bonnie, Bob, Monica, really appreciate it. Appreciate your support and your membership. And
What
you know, again, you will find this presentation probably tomorrow, since I have got to jump and go to something off-site in Kentucky. So this will be up and posted to our GoToWebinar channel on Friday. We'll blast that out to everybody. So those that missed it today will be able to watch it tomorrow and forever. And until next time, which is the third Thursday at 3 o'clock in April, y'all take care.
Thank
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 you.
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 All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.